And hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I'm Marshall, your host for today. And today we are going to talk about Kriegsspiel as an experience. You can see that I've got Tabletop Simulator open. I'm just playing around. Somebody made a really cool new module with the original Kriegsspiel maps, and I'm just kind of playing with it to see if it works better than the module we've been using for the past year and a half. I think it does. If we have any kind of audio or other issues, please just let me know in the chat. The reason simply being that I've been messing around with new audio and everything. A couple of weeks ago, we didn't run Coffee, Kegs, and Creekspill because my headset basically died. I had no way of really communicating with you and certainly not hearing you. I went out and got a new headset finally. And then last Sunday, I had a live event near where I live, which I played, or not played, I ran. And the author, Leonard Carpenter. He wrote a bunch of books about Conan the Barbarian, and some science fiction books came, played in the event, and said it was the most fun he had ever had playing a game. So that was pretty high praise coming from Mr. Carpenter, and it was pretty cool playing the event. I did post some of the details of the battle to, I think, the general chat here. I'm sure it's buried, unfortunately, but you can probably scroll back about a week or so as of the time of this recording, which, by the way, happens to be Easter Sunday, April 9th, 2023. So happy Easter to everyone out there. All right, let's talk about Kriegspiel as an experience. And again, I don't have this open for any particular reason. I was messing with it and I figured it's something prettier to look at besides my face. So that's why that's up there. Um, in the past few weeks or so, and this is not a new experience, I've seen players experience some hard times in Kriegsspiel, our campaign games, our open Saturday battles, and other things. And um, if you think I'm speaking to you personally, I assure you I am not. I am speaking very generally today because I have had several instances where I've encountered players who've got their emotions caught up in the game. And some of the games, like the Red versus Blue campaign, that's intentional. Red versus Blue is really more of a role playing event rather than a proper Kriegspiel combat event. But the reason why we catch your emotions up, the reason why we have you develop a character, the reason why permadeath exists, so that if you die in the role play, you're out of the game. The reason why there's all these consequences, and I'm throwing emotional curveballs and I'm frustrating people and picking on them and so on. The whole reason behind that is to get you invested in the units that you command and in the side that you participate with. And what we found is that changes the behavior of players when they do participate in a battle. Generally, they become much more conservative. They make smarter decisions, more or less. And that's kind of the whole point of the entire Red versus Blue experience, even going back to the original campaign almost 2 years ago. So we're trying to get people invested. We're trying to see how do they play differently if they are emotionally invested in their character, in their nation, in their units, in the game, and so on. Unfortunately, along with that, sometimes comes some pretty harsh reactions. And it's quite understandable, actually. It doesn't necessarily reflect badly on the player to a large degree because it's expected. It is expected that if you invest hours and hours and hours of your time and energy and so on, you just invest heavily into developing a character and playing in a campaign and playing in a site and something bad happens, you should have an upset reaction. Now, the problem is when people just kind of carry it a little bit too far. We do, as umpires, expect that players are going to react to bad news, and they're not going to say, "Oh, that's no big deal." Well, that's not actually the response we want. We're looking for a response of concern. Oh, that's a big deal. I really need to address this. We're looking for a healthy response. And at the end of the day, Kriegsspiel is an evaluation. That's why it was developed. It was developed not so much as a game, but as a training exercise and as a tool for evaluation. It was originally played by the Prussians for those reasons. It is still played by militaries around the world for exactly those reasons. It is, excuse me, first and foremost, a training exercise in which cadets or young officers are put into a scenario and we want to see, do they know their stuff? And what can they learn from this experience? In other words, we use it to illustrate things to teach. Here is an interactive teaching tool that was developed 2 centuries before the entire concept of interactive education became in vogue. Of course, interactive education probably goes back to the earliest days of existence, so maybe I misspeak there. But neither here nor there. The point is, it's an interactive training exercise, but it is also a tool for evaluation as an officer in command of troops with young cadets or lieutenants or whatever coming in underneath you, you want to know how they're going to behave in a certain situation. For example, let's take a gambling analogy, right? When you gamble, there are people who play differently. There are people who are very cold, solid as a rock gamblers. Like they know the odds, they know their stuff, they're very analytical. They're looking for tells in the faces of the other players. You know, you can't really get a read on them. And you look at their betting behavior, and even sometimes, they can be tricky and they throw you off. These are the serious poker players. These are the ones who win the tournaments. Because even though it's ultimately a game of chance, it's also a game of skill, and that you're actually playing the other players and so on. These people are very dependable and reliable. Generally, they are also very predictable. You know that if they fold, they don't have anything, they don't usually throw away their good cards. You know how if they bet, it's because they have good cards. You get to know that, right? On the other hand, though, you have these other players who play emotionally, and they're much more common. For example, a player will get upset and they start making bigger bets. They try chasing losses. They try going all in every hand to steal blinds. If you know poker terminology, if you don't know poker terminology, actually, don't worry about it. The idea is there are people who will play based on their emotions rather than the logic that underpins the game. They're not looking at odds of which card is going to come up next. They're not studying the other players or the betting behavior. They're just throwing everything they've got into a situation. Now, let's translate this back into the battlefield. On a battlefield, if you have an officer who, suddenly sustains some losses and he gets his dander up, so to speak, and he starts committing units into a situation that the enemy has probably orchestrated, that's a pretty bad thing. And you want to know how the officer is going to react to that. You also want to know how will officers react if they're in a no-win situation? Because, if the army has to retreat for any reason, someone's going to have to serve as a rear guard. And that rear guard may be sacrificed because you have to buy time. Imagine you go to an officer and you say, I need you to hold this position at all costs for, the next 6 hours while the army packs up and moves out. Now, you want the officer to say, yes, sir, I will hold, for the next 6 hours. Period. End of sentence. Sir, yes, sir. That's the response you want from the officer. What happens now if you go to the officer and the officer's like, absolutely not, I'm out of here too. You guys are retreating. I'm going to beat you back to the Capitol. you know, Whatever. What if the officer has a mental breakdown or freaks out or, says, no, no, we're going to attack. We're going to do something different. Um, that is something you want to know before you put that officer in that position or even have them under your command. If you've seen the movie All Quiet on the Western Front, and I'm talking about the new version that came out just last year, the 2022 edition of the movie. At the end of the movie, you have an officer who is basically learning that, hey, we're going to surrender. We've lost the war. And he reacts in a very contrary and tragic way. And you want to know what your officers are made of. And that's one of the things that Kriegsspiel allows you to assess. So let's talk about the player experience, right? So when we're playing Kriegsspiel, we're playing it as a game. We're not training officers. This is not the military. We don't play games that take 2, 3, 4, 5 days to work everything out. We don't have lectures or lessons or professors or any of that stuff. Um, we do mirror that in some capacity, right? We have master umpires, we have lead umpires. We do teach and learn and explore military concepts with this, but mostly we're doing this for fun. However, we still follow the tradition in that we expect a certain level of conduct and decorum from all participants. Why? Well, we want to keep the community healthy. We enjoy interacting with professional practitioners of wargaming, so we want to invite them and have them feel welcome and safe interacting with us, which is not something they will feel if there are certain kinds of commentary going on in our Discord chat or if players behave in a certain manner. We want people to take us seriously. And frankly, and I could go off on a whole nother tangent on how we are absolutely positively 100% adding a very nice, thick, healthy chapter to the history of this game. Like in 100 years from now, when people look back and learn about Kriegspiel, they will in fact read about the International Kriegspiel Society, and they will in fact take a look at some of the stuff that we have managed to do. Because a lot of this stuff is going to be archived. These videos are going to exist. People are going to come back. They're going to go back in the archives just the same way we go back in the old books. And they're going to say, well, what did the IKS do? They played it as a game. I want to play it as a game too. What lessons can I learn from them? And I guarantee you that's just going to happen. I guarantee it. And so we want to maintain a certain level of decorum, a certain standard of behavior. So what do we expect from players? We expect that players will react emotionally to bad news, just as they react emotionally to good news. That's okay. But you have to manage your reaction. Don't carry it on too far. Don't begin blaming other people for what's happened to you. Are they at fault? Quite possibly. But that does not mean it is appropriate to level accusations at another player or to carry on. You can, role play that, but if you're role playing that, make sure that the other character or the other person, I should say, that you're interacting with understands very clearly that you're only role playing and knock it off after a certain point. Don't take it to what we would call the nth degree, right? Just say, okay, I can't believe that my commander in chief gave me these orders. I'm throwing him under the bridge, whatever. That's fine. That's fun, you know. But if you really carry on about it, people start to think, well, maybe this isn't role play. Maybe this is something kind of personal. We really want to avoid that because why? Why do we want to ruin the day or the experience and get all caught up like that? It's not gentle personly behavior. There's some other things you have to understand. When we play Kriegspiel, one of the things is that it's remarkably arbitrary. It really is. In fact, this is one of the reasons why the results or the rules are kept hidden from the players. Although there are rules and you're rolling dice and you're doing things, there's still a certain level of umpire discretion that goes into the combat resolution, and where an umpire says, well, I have a unit here versus a unit here, and I have to decide what modifiers I want to give these units. If this guy is here and this guy is down here, okay, am I going to modify the die by a +1 or a +2? How am I going to evaluate this situation? And often you will find as an umpire, there are reasons to go almost either way on this. And so you're really thinking and calculating in your head, and you only have a few seconds to make a decision because you can't take all day. Remember, we're playing it as a game. So we've got maybe 4 or 5 hours maximum before people are like, dude, I got to go. I got things going on in my real world life. I can't sit here and play Kriegsspiel for 6, 8, 10 hours, even though we have run some games that went that long. But people start getting anxious and you got to go. And you're not going to finish the game at that pace. So you have to take a look at this and you have to make a snap decision. And that decision can feel and often is relatively arbitrary. What bonus do I give to this unit that's in the woods? I don't know, +1, +2, minus. Do we say, oh, well, the foliage is thick and the unit is not in a perfect line because, they're interspersed amongst trees and that's going to affect the quality of their fire or hearing orders or their smoke or whatever? What do you do? And so umpires have to make these decisions. Now, that is one of those things like they say if you like the law or sausage, you should not watch either one being made. Likewise with Kriegspiel, if you enjoy Kriegspiel, it's probably not a good idea to sit and watch how the umpires resolve things because you're going to get upset. You're going to think, I can't believe they did it that way. I would have done it completely the opposite way. But here's the deal, right? In real life, just like in actual war, there are things that are happening that are absolutely beyond your control, that you have no clue that are factors and that are affecting the outcome. And this happens all the time. There are emotional factors. The emotional state of the umpire is a factor. It's not just, is the umpire following the rules? Because again, you can't write rules to cover every circumstance. The umpire is a human being, but just out there in the real world, the combatants on both sides are also human beings. Their emotional state is a factor in the outcome of a real life conflict. And there are all kinds of variables. You could have a bubble of gas in your stomach and it affects your behavior and your judgment and your attitude, and bam, everything could turn on that. You have no idea. And it carries over to your professional life, right? Your boss could be having a great day or a bad day, or your coworkers or your subordinates, whatever. These things have a bearing on the outcome. So when an umpire, this here's the point, when the umpire makes a decision, you have to understand there are a lot of factors in that decision that are actually beyond the scope of the rules. The umpire themselves may not even be aware of it. But that's also the same as in real life. In real life, there are a lot of things that are happening that are simply illogical, that don't make a lot of sense. That if you were to sit down and analyze it from, let's say, a financial perspective, and let's say you're an accountant, right? And you look at people's spending habits. How often are those spending habits logical? Quite uncommon. People do things based on emotion, and they are often not even aware that they're doing it on emotion. You can talk to people who actually believe they are logical financial planners and spenders and savers and so on. No, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. You just spent, $5,000 on a pair of boots. What's wrong with you? What were you thinking? That's a lot of money. But, emotions do what emotions do. And that's reality. People do things like this all the time. Otherwise, they would not make Versace, jeans or whatever they make that sell for incredible amounts of money. They would not make Tesla cars, you know, and all these things that people have, these extravagant luxuries that people spend money on. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. If you have those things, that's great. Enjoy them. But at the end of the day, my point is our emotions drive a lot of our behaviors. And this is also a factor in your umpire's decisions, and it's a factor for you as well as the players as well. At the end of the day, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to freak out and throw your hands up and protest every time something goes a way that you don't want it to go? Or are you going to calmly accept the consequences and say, how can I work this problem to either minimize my losses or maximize the beneficial effect for myself or my team, or at a bare minimum, to suffer with dignity and grace? Because at the end of the day, that's basically your choice. And ideally, we're looking for people who are going to say, I'm going to suffer with dignity and grace, or I am going to maximize the benefit to myself or my side, even though I'm going to lose, you know? And those are the behaviors that we are looking for. And that's what we would like to educate people. And that's the lesson that you then carry on into your real life, because Kriegsspiel also has a bearing in real life. So you want to understand that things are emotional, things happen that are beyond your control. There are a lot of factors that are at play. It's not just the rule set. And at the end of the day, it's up to you how you react to those things. All right. Not a particularly deep or profound revelation, but I feel it's something that needs to be said. And in the IKS, for reasons previously stated, we want to work with professionals and we are going to leave behind a historical legacy. We want certain kinds of reactions and behaviors. We have a certain standard for decorum, and I ask that all participants please try to meet those standards. We understand people are going to slip. People are going to have moments where they get frustrated. Even I sometimes have to take a break now and then. It happens. That's okay, you know, but don't carry it on to the nth degree. And, remember, if you're role playing something like a harsh reaction to something, like you're throwing your subordinates under the bus, I can't believe they betrayed the cause. Make it clear, of course, that, you're in character and it's part of the experience. And again, don't carry it on too far. Let's take a look here. I don't see any comments really in the YouTube. I do see Achilles. Hello. He says, Happy Easter, sir. And I see a number of you who are in the audience. So we do have a few more minutes. I wanted to see if anybody wants to volunteer to speak in the Discord or has a question. If so, raise your hand and I will promote you. If not, we will wrap up. All right. Do you have a question? I don't see any questions. She got about 10 seconds to hit the button. But anyway, that is basically the lesson that I have for everyone. And I hope that people take it to heart and find it uh, as inspiration to consider and evaluate, how am I behaving in my games and how can I do better? And then I invite you to cross apply that to the rest of your life, because I think the lessons that we learn in Kriegsspiel are actually enormously practical. They're practical on the job, they're practical in the house, they're practical in the community. And, I think it makes a difference. So there you have it. Well, I want to thank you all. I am ending just a little early, but I don't want to just talk to fill time. I think I've said everything I need to say just about as well as I can say it shooting from the hip. I should have prepared notes, but I'm working on other things this morning. I am trying to build a map of Dublin. Let me show you here. I have to snip it out and paste it together, which you can see here. Let me zoom this out. Yes, yeah, I'm piecing this together for a game that we're playing in a week. So open Saturday, it's going to be the Easter Rising, and I've got to get the map going, and so I'm trying to reproduce it. And keeping the scale consistent is a real pain, because you come over here to this thing and you click something, and oops, it zooms in or out without you intending it. So anyway, working on all of that. So if my presentation seems rough, I apologize. That's the reason. Nonetheless, that's what we got going on. And I do want to thank you all for being here. And that's the end of the show. So I will see